A house that loves God. We need to be a people that loves God. We need to love each other. Did you know that painting a room, like say your bedroom, can actually be fun and fulfilling to some people? Who are those people? And then to others, it can be very monotonous and quite a painful task. Well, for those who find it kind of painful, listen to this morning. Did you know it takes 13 years to paint the George Washington Bridge from end to end? 13 years, paintbrush in hand. More than 50 million vehicles cross this bridge, and there are 20 workers who clamber up and down the scaffolding of this 88-year-old bridge, painting every day. Now, in order to qualify for this job, you must qualify with the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, and applicants are required to pass multiple written tests for painting a bridge. Sorry, is Benny here? Sorry. Painting is very stressful, and no, he's not, I don't think he's here. But and so they go through these written tests before they take the final height test. These folks have to walk they have to walk 25 feet across a 6-inch beam without showing any fear. So I figured, okay, you put a 25-inch beam out in a parking lot, and, 6 inches, could I maybe make it across? I don't know. If it wasn't windy, maybe. I might be able to make it. Probably not. I'd probably fall off. But here's the catch. The applicants are 60 stories above the freezing Hudson River when they were walking across this beam. So, count me out on that one. I wouldn't even be hugging the beam and going across. Give me some dry land. So after 13 years, what does this elite crew have to show for its efforts? A bridge that once again needs to be painted. So, overall, life is pretty great. Yeah, we go through some trials and testings and circumstances in life, but we have been all blessed by God in so many ways. But there are times and seasons that life just seems like you're painting the George Washington Bridge. You drag yourself into that cement-floored factory yet again. You head to the office, go off to your little cubicle, just you and your computer, day after day. Into that store and stock the shelves with the same things you stocked them with yesterday. You hop up into that truck seat like you've done thousands of times before. Then you go home. You stain the deck. You cut the grass. You rake the leaves. You shovel the driveway. You plant the garden. You change another diaper. You make the lunches. You buy the clothes, fix the car, do the laundry, make the supper, pay the bills, save for the kids' schooling, pay the mortgage, and save for retirement. So all of these things, they are needed, they need to be done, they need to be taken care of. But while all these things are going on in our life, as Christians, we must consider and ask ourselves, how are we preparing for our future home? We talked about it today. How are we preparing for our future home? How are we preparing for eternity? And I wish I could take credit for this illustration that I'm going to show you. But this is a Francis Chan illustration. I saw it on a video. And I believe this illustration, it puts it into perspective, what we're talking about. Our lives in the here and now, and our lives for all of eternity. Just give me 1 sec. I'll be right back. I went to the fire hall, like we've done so many times before when you had picnics, Sunday school picnics, when we had tug-of-wars and different things like that. We always borrowed the tug-of-war rope from the fire department. Very nice people down at the fire department. Very nice people. So you can see we got a pretty long rope here. And I've got a couple of pieces of tape here on the end of the rope. We see the white piece of tape. This white piece of tape represents your life and my life from 0 until retirement, whenever that day is, if it hasn't come yet. So all those things we talked about are taking place during this period of time. And you know, we've been taught to work hard, to save our money, be frugal, buy RSPs, because we must save for retirement. Retirement is this little black piece of tape right here, this section of time. So we have our life 0 to 60, and we work and we think about and we wonder, will I have enough money for retirement? But we put so much effort into this amount of life right here. But what about this? What about this? The rest of this rope represents eternity. Now this rope, the rest of it got dragged in, and this rope has an end. But eternity never ends. That's kind of mind-blowing because we can't really wrap our heads around that thought. But eternity never ends. What are we doing now to plan for eternity? Well, we're going to take a look at the life of King Solomon. His obedience, wisdom, and understanding, his encounters and experiences with God, his accomplishments while ruling Israel, and how these things were preparing him for eternity. If you can look up 1 Kings 3, verses 1 to 15, and we'll read those. This is Solomon's first encounter with God. It's 1 Kings 3, 1 to 15. Solomon made an alliance with Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, and married one of his daughters. He brought her to live in the city of David until he could finish building his palace and the temple of the Lord and the wall around the city. At that time, the people of Israel sacrificed their offerings at a local place of worship, for a temple honoring the name of the Lord had not yet been built. Solomon loved the Lord and followed all the decrees of his father David, except Solomon too offered sacrifices and burnt incense at the local places of worship. The most important of these places of worship was at Gibeon. So the king went there and sacrificed 1,000 burnt offerings. That night, the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream. And God said, "What do you want? Ask, and I will give it to you." Solomon replied, "You showed faithful love to your servant, my father David, because he was honest and true and faithful to you. And you have continued your faithful love to him today by giving him a son to sit on his throne. Now, O Lord my God, you have made me king instead of my father David. But I am like a little child who doesn't know his way around. And here I am in the midst of your own chosen people, a nation so great and numerous they cannot be counted. Give me an understanding heart so that I can govern your people well and know the difference between right and wrong. For who by himself is able to govern this great people of yours?" The Lord was pleased that Solomon had asked for wisdom. So God replied, "Because you have asked for wisdom in governing my people with justice, and have not asked for long life or wealth or death of your enemies, I will give you what you have asked for. I will give you a wise and understanding heart, and I will also give you what you did not ask for, riches and fame. No other king in all the world will be compared to you for the rest of your life. And if you follow me and obey the decrees and the commandments of my father, as my father David did, I will give you a long life. Then Solomon woke up and realized it had been a dream. Excuse me. He returned to Jerusalem and stood before the ark of the Lord's covenant, where he sacrificed burnt offerings and peace offerings, and then he invited all his officials to a great banquet. So we see in verse number 3 that Solomon loved the Lord, and he followed all of the Lord's decrees. And Solomon, he also showed great humility when God appeared to him in a dream. And he acknowledged his inability to rule Israel. So he asked God for wisdom and understanding. And God was pleased with Solomon's request. And he was so pleased that he also gave him riches and fame. So Solomon, his beginning as king, it seemed to be off to such a tremendous start. You know, God appeared to him and promised him all of these things. What a tremendous start that Solomon got off to in his kingdom. Except for what he did in verse number 1. In verse number 1, it said, he married one of the daughters of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Now Solomon, he did this mostly for political reasons. He wanted to have peace with all the nations around him, so he took the daughter of Pharaoh to be his wife so that the two nations could be at peace. But Solomon knew that the Lord had instructed the people of Israel not to marry women from other nations, because they will turn your hearts to other gods. So this decision that Solomon made early on, it came back to bite him later on in life. But God blessed Solomon. He blessed him with wisdom. He blessed him with understanding, riches, and fame. And because of all of these blessings, Solomon had a lifetime of incredible accomplishments. He built the temple. He built a temple for the Lord and a place for himself also, a palace. And these two structures, they were so detailed, they were so beautiful, that they took 20 years to build. Just a few years more than painting the George Washington Bridge. Solomon improved defensive measures for the nation, and he developed a more sophisticated taxation system, which resulted in a financial windfall for his kingdom. The people weren't all too happy about it, but his kingdom grew because of it. He shared wisdom and received tributes and gifts from other nations. Leaders from other nations would come to hear Solomon speak. He could speak about things about nature and all kinds of different things. He had this wisdom from God, and other leaders realized that they would come and hear him speak, and they would bring gifts to him. And so he continued to amass wealth and riches in his kingdom. He established a land and sea trading system and a powerful navy and army to protect his trading routes. Solomon's rule was so prosperous that silver became as common as stones. So you got a few rocks out in the parking lot. In Solomon's day, they could be hunks of silver. Who cares? We'll let them sit there and throw them in the pond. And each year, Solomon received 25 tons of gold. Every single year, pouring into his kingdom. 25 tons of gold. In our money today, that's well over $1 billion every single year. Just pouring into, that's just one thing. Gold was just one thing. So it really kind of makes you feel sorry for fellas like John Traveris and Matthews and Marner of the Leafs. You know, these poor young fellas, they're scraping by with a mere $11 million a year. I have no idea how these guys are making it. These poor young fellas. So Out of all the things Solomon did, building the temple was his greatest accomplishment. And right after the temple was built, God appeared to Solomon a second time. And God's second appearance to Solomon, it was more of a warning. It was more of a warning to Solomon. And God laid out to Solomon two choices, two options for him to take. And he said to Solomon, he said, if you obey my commands, one of your descendants will always sit on the throne of Israel. Then he gave him choice number 2. He said, Solomon, disobey and follow other gods. Israel will be mocked and ridiculed and uprooted by other nations. So it was decision time for Solomon. Let's read 1 Kings 11. I'm going to read 1 Kings 11, 1 to 6, and then jump down to 9 and 11. Let's see what Solomon chose to do. 1 Kings 11, 1 to 6, first of all. Now King Solomon loved many foreign women, besides Pharaoh's daughter. He married women from Moab, Ammon, Edom, Sidon, and from amongst the Hittites. The Lord clearly instructed the people of Israel, you must not marry them, because they will turn your hearts to other gods. Yet Solomon insisted on loving them anyway. Here we go. That's how it starts. And this is how it ends. He had 700 wives and 300 concubines. Solomon, what were you thinking? Oh yes, you weren't. And in fact, they did. This is one of the saddest stories in the Bible. It's really one of the saddest stories. They did turn his heart away from the Lord. After Solomon had encounters with God and all these promises, the wisdom and the understanding, the riches and fame, he had it all from God. And he allowed these women to turn his heart away from the Lord. In Solomon, and here's another one, in his old age, he's got 700 women as wives and 300 concubines. So in his old age, they turned his heart to worship other gods instead of being completely faithful to the Lord his God and his father David, as his father David had been. Solomon worshipped Ashtaroth, the goddess of the Sidonites, and Moloch, the detestable god of the Amorites. In this way, Solomon did what was evil in the Lord's sight. He refused to follow the Lord completely, as his father David had done. Verse 9, the Lord was very angry with Solomon, for his heart had turned away from the Lord, the God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice. He had warned Solomon specifically about worshiping other gods, but Solomon did not listen to the Lord's command. So the Lord said to him, since you have not kept my covenant and have disobeyed my decrees, I will surely tear the kingdom away from you and give it to one of your servants. We'll stop there. So some people, they collect stamps. Other people, they collect coins. You got others that maybe collect spoons, You might find even a St. Thomas spoon, with a little jumbo guy on the handle with St. Thomas on it. They might be out there somewhere for all you spoon collectors. Others, you might collect hockey cards. I've got more hockey cards than you can think of, for whatever reason. But it would appear Solomon enjoyed collecting wives. He was a wife collector. Everybody needs a hobby. Now, maybe you think the TV show Bachelor. We familiar with that show, The Bachelor? That's a messed up show. It's a messed up show. But the Solomon Show was 100 times more messed up than The Bachelor. At least The Bachelor was going like down. He started with 20 and ended up with 1. Solomon started with 1 and ended up with 1,000. He went in the other direction. So the Solomon Show was messed up. And in Solomon's old age, yes, he had 700 foreign wives and 300 concubines. Now, a concubine was a secondary wife. She had rights and protections, but she was not of equal status as a wife. So, here's a question. Where was Solomon's wisdom in this decision? I'm thinking it had to be, maybe it started as a lustful thing, but as it continued, it had to be more than that. I mean, I don't know what their calendar was like, if they had the same calendar or whatever, but let's say he's got 365 days and 1,000 ladies. Do the math, like Solomon, and he's an old guy. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. So I'm just speculating, but I'm thinking maybe some pride entered into Solomon's heart. After all, he was the smartest, he was the wisest, he had the most understanding, he was the richest guy around, he had the most fame. So he's maybe looking around to some of these other nations. Hey, buddy over here has got like 400 wives, so I better get going, because I want to be the greatest at everything. I want to have the most of everything. But wisdom didn't play a part in Solomon's decisions. So just as the Lord had said, these ladies turned Solomon's heart away from the Lord. Solomon stopped loving God completely. He also stopped loving the Israelite people. As God said, Israel would be uprooted if you worship other gods. So Solomon's decision was very selfish. He messed up a whole nation with his decision. So he stopped loving all of the people that he was the king of. Solomon's wisdom and understanding were given to him by God. This wasn't book knowledge. This wasn't like he studied at university for years to get this wisdom. This wisdom was given to him by God. And he chose his own way. The best and the wisest of men, when left to themselves, may do the worst and most foolish of things. God gave Solomon fame, fortune, dreams, and encounters. But he chose his own way. During Solomon's lifetime, he worshiped and praised God and offered extravagant sacrifices, sometimes like slaughtering thousands and thousands of animals in giving sacrifice. But all along, God was saying, Solomon, to obey is better than sacrifice. And God was looking for Solomon's obedience. That's all God wanted. But Solomon chose his own way. So let's fast forward this morning and ask ourselves what we can learn from the life of Solomon. Now, Solomon failed in two areas. He stopped loving God, and he stopped loving people. Jesus was asked one day, what is the most important commandment? Jesus said, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself. God is our Father, and we are his children this morning. God is our loving Heavenly Father, and we are his children. So how do we love God? We love God by being obedient to him. How do we love each other? How do we prepare for eternity? The Bible says, if you give even a cup of cold water to one of the least of my followers, you will surely be rewarded. There will be a last night for every person. A last meal, a last statement, a last breath, and then eternity. It's closer than we think. It's closer than we think. We need to live wisely, loving God with all of our hearts and loving our neighbors as ourselves, because we don't know how much time we have left. The foundation of this church and every church, it must be love. It must be love. You know, we've got lots of things going on, lots of changes. Our foundation must be love. We must love God, and we must love one another. So this morning, what is your cup of cold water that you can offer? Maybe it's something as simple as a loving smile, a word of encouragement, a plate of muffins, or maybe a card or a note that would bless and help someone more than you could imagine. We all need to ask God what our cup of cold water is, and then let's use it to bless someone in this place this week. Ask God, what can I do? Look through the church directory and say, Lord, who could I bless this week coming up, this Sunday coming? Because this place, it needs to be a house filled with the love of God in our lives, and we need to love one another. Now this morning, I have a colorful pencil for everyone here this morning. I have a colorful pencil. And I actually don't want you to use this pencil, but I want you to keep it somewhere where it's handy and you can see it. And I want it to be a reminder to you to use your cup of cold water, to do the cup of cold water act to someone in this place. It might not be writing a note, it might be something else. Maybe you're a muffin person. But we all need to be filled with the love of God, and we need to love one another.